Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You're listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tersh Blissett. Josh is not with us today. He's working on some stuff with his business that he had to do like a full day event, like a couple of days of, actually several days worth of stuff. But so he's not with us today. But I get to talk with. Actually, I don't think Josh was with us last time. Whenever Michelle and I talked, but Michelle Jeppesen is with Jill's office, and she is back for round two of talking with us on the podcast, Service Business Mastery Podcast. This podcast is focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Our goal with this show is to help answer some unasked questions you may have and help answer some questions that you've forgotten in the past, like you've learned and then forgot them. So bringing them back to the top of mind awareness. Jill, we had a conversation previously, and we're talking about customer service and stuff like that. So if you missed that episode, I will tag that in the show notes, and you need to check out that one for sure. It's a great episode. Today we are talking about what happens whenever your customer is wrong, how to effectively communicate with difficult customers. This is a challenging one for sure. I will say that we recently onboarded with CallRail as our VoIP system. And one of their plugins or one of their features that you can turn on is this AI system that transcribes it. And it also will tell you the emotion, like real-time emotion of the customer. So you can tell when a client starts getting irritated or whatever. I thought that was a really cool thing. I've been geeking out on some AI stuff because Josh and I are giving us a speech, or we're giving a keynote at the Business Uncensored event at Service World Expo in a couple of weeks. So and it's going to be on how AI is disrupting the industry. So if you're going to be at the event, check that out. It's on Friday morning. We'll be on a big stage, which is weird because we haven't done big stage stuff before, Josh and I together. So that's exciting. But before we get started with today's show, I'd love to give a huge shout out to the people who make these episodes possible. Upfrog, Justin Noah, their team over at Upfrog, they do amazing online pricing. So like setting up pricing on your website, that's amazing. It's definitely taboo for our industry to have prices on your website. So there's a huge debate whether to do it or not to do it. And Justin and Noah, they have great conversations about it and why it does work. And they have actual numbers. It's not emotions. So they also do reactivation campaigns with your clients. So if your clients are you're not engaging with your current clients, that's a huge deal. So it's a reactivation campaign. I actually am probably going to do one here shortly as our shoulder season starts to happen. So I'll share exactly how that's going for us as we do that. So does it tell the emotion of your CSR? Actually, I'll get back with you on that. I'm pretty sure it does, but I don't want to say for sure it does or not. Someone asked in the group chat about the CallRail. It's not a CallRail commercial. They're not a sponsor of the show, not yet, but we'd love for you to be a sponsor. I will get back to you on that one though, for sure. Now, someone who is a sponsor and partner, and the first actual full-time long-term partner is Sarah, and that Billy Stevens. I was talking to Michelle with Jill's office before we actually started recording about Sarah, and I met Billy at a trade show at the Profit Rocket show, I believe, in Las Vegas. And ever since then, it's just been an amazing relationship with Billy and his team. And I knew that I would get on Sarah because of just the fact that the people behind the product really care about our industry, and they are in our industry, from our industry. So Sarah is an amazing CRM. If you have any questions about it, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to help out and answer those questions for you. Next is Copeland compressors. They are a great compressor. Obviously, they're in pretty much everything out there, but they are a partner with our show, and they're sponsor of our show because they do a lot of training. They train the trainers, teach the trainers how to train things, or train their employees and team members. There's obviously a lot of warranty compressors that go back that aren't actually failed compressors. They just got replaced by mistake, which is a massive cost to the business owner if you're doing things under warranty. So it's good to train on what not to do, or to avoid those costly errors whenever you're replacing a compressor that doesn't actually need to be replaced. Yeah, reach out. Copeland.com is the website there, and I'll add a link to where the training platform is. Last but definitely not least, Company Cam, the digital asset management tool. It collects photos and everything from the from your job site, and it's a very consistent place for photos to be. And you can actually send the photos from Company Cam to your client if you like. They can follow along the project if you have like a project that you're doing. Really cool process. But also I have an integration there between Sarah and Company Cam. So every time I create a new job in Sarah, it creates a new project in Company Cam, and Company Cam actually saves a lot of your metadata and geotags and stuff like that. So when you and you can actually have it set up so it carousels on your website, which is really cool. And Google can see the geotags, so that helps out with your Google listings whenever people are asking for services around their area, and you've done work, then you start popping up in theirs. With that being said, huge shout out to everybody that makes this show possible. Without them, we couldn't do this many shows. We couldn't go and do trips like we're going to Service World Expo and Business Uncensored here in a couple of weeks. We wouldn't be able to do stuff like that all the time like we are without these partners. So a huge shout out to them. We appreciate everything that they do for us. And they're also a wealth of knowledge, and they also come on the show and share that knowledge. So we appreciate that too. With that being said, let's get started with today's show.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Hey, Michelle, welcome back.
Hey, Tersh. I'm so excited to be back here.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about customers when the customer is wrong. The customer is not always right. That's the old adage that we used to hear all the time, and it's something that I've been guilty of saying it to my CSR, and it's obviously not accurate. What do you say about that?
Okay. So first of all, it's funny, we were talking before, this is going to be a fun conversation, and it actually is a fun conversation, even though when you think of the topic by itself, it doesn't sound fun. Oh, yeah. But before we dive into it, I want to say 2 huge wins about having difficult customers. It's actually a really good thing for your business.
Really?
And the first reason why is when you have a customer who's wrong or that's difficult, and they're not always the same thing, but sometimes they can be. It is a huge opportunity to relook at your processes, because usually there's some system or some operation that either needs to be created or tweaked. There's some gap there oftentimes of why this is even happening. So it's a really good way to refine. And the other thing is, okay, so there's actually this book that an MD wrote called Keep Sharp. And he was talking about how to keep your brain just like fully functioning in its highest capacity that it can at any age. And he actually said that the most effective thing to do, more than reading, books, solving hard, complicated math problems or whatever it is, he said it's actually solving people problems. He said those are the most complex things that make the most parts of your brain have to work. So working through people problems every day is actually the best way to keep your brain sharp. So anyway, so this is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's wild to think about too, but I could see it making your brain sharp, but on the other hand, I don't know about your emotional. Like if I had to do that every single day, like deal with just angry customers, I don't know if I could stay a positive person in general, Well,
it doesn't always have to be angry. I think but yeah, I get what you're saying. But the concept of it, working, like just having relationships is one of the most complex things we can do with our brain. And so I think, so anyway, I'm excited to dive into this today. And, it's funny you mentioned that AI, because we have a programmer building that in our system right now as well. of being able to tell the kind of the temperature, so to speak, of the client. And a good bridge from our last conversation, because when we last got on, we were talking about when is AI really effective when it comes to customer service, and when do you need real flesh blood?
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to dealing with upset or angry or difficult customers, that is when you usually really need someone live. This is a really good instance because
Mhm.
you've really got to help get them to a good place again. And
Yeah.
as I think AI can help, but I think this is where you really need a human to step in. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
a really good point. Now with the new, yeah, so I remember we talked about the AI in the past recording,
Mhm.
which I feel like here lately, every time I talk to somebody, I'm asking about AI because I'm giving this talk about AI, and so it's like super top of mind for me. And I didn't realize that people didn't use Chat GPT as much as I do. I probably use it 40 to 50 times a day, and like I almost kind of thought that was normal because like Josh and I both are this like the same way. We're like we don't Google things anymore. We use Chat GPT for all that. And so with that, the new AI that y'all are building out in your program, because someone asked in the introduction part of it, does it tell the emotion of a CSR? Do you think that will yours be
I
able
would
to?
think it would, because
Yeah.
the way at least we're programming our system, and I'm guessing they just have integrations, which is what we're doing,
Yeah.
is the way it works is it's recording the call, and just live on the call it's assessing both the emotion of the caller and also of the CSR or whoever's talking. So it should be able. I would be really surprised if it didn't, because I think that's the whole point of it, is
I'm
regardless of who's talking.
I'm really curious about that because when I get on the phone, I can sound like a teetotal jerk. Like, and I know that about myself, especially if I know I'm going to a difficult conversation. I'm curious how it would assess me because I have a naturally deep voice, and I just come at you and I stop, and then so that you can talk, and then like I'm curious. I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
try. I'm gonna have to play with that a little bit.
Yeah, you should play with it. Our programmer was showing it. He was demoing it a little bit for us, and I mean, it's not 100%. That's the thing about technology, is
Right.
it tries to look for patterns, and it's going to get smarter. But I think it is, speed, tone of voice, wording. But that's where it's not always perfect too, because you might not be like no problem, for instance. That can sound like a negative phrase, but it's actually a positive one. So it's not 100%, but it can help.
And also, so I'm a smart ass. I just out there, put it out there. And so like whenever I say right, it's not I'm not complimenting you. Okay. I understand. Like whatever you're saying. Like let's move on with this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And then someone else
Kind
might
of
say,
sarcastic. Yeah.
right, right. And they're agreeing
Exactly.
with you. And I'm saying,
Yeah.
right.
Right. There's a
Gotcha.
lot of nuance to it, and
Yeah.
the technology is still really new. It's still in its infantile stage, so it's going to get better, but it's not perfect. But it definitely, yeah, I definitely think it can help. Right? It definitely can.
Exactly. And
So
and Corey is on the show. He's watching us live. And earlier he mentioned Smile and Dial. And that's a very good point, Corey, you made there. He's really big into AI as well. And he's got some built-in motion detectors for CSR. Oh,
yeah, ours
and he's
does the
got
same thing. That's really cool.
yeah.
Well, but okay, so diving into though emotions, because I mean that's kind of the key to this conversation, because
Right.
we think we often think we're logical creatures that have emotions. But the reality of it is we're emotional creatures that have logic. We are wired for connection, we're wired for emotion. It's the whole way we function. So when you're dealing with a customer who is wrong or upset or difficult, it's the emotion first that you really have to take care of. It's kind of like, if you're in an accident and you're bleeding, you first got to stop the bleeding, and the
Yeah.
filling is the bleeding. You've got to figure out how do we handle that before we can wound it and patch it up and all that kind of stuff.
It's almost like um I'm it's the hierarchy of needs.
Mhm. Yes,
Maslow.
Maslow's hierarchy of
Yeah,
needs.
that
Yeah.
yeah. I was reading it in my brain as I was saying it. But yeah, that hierarchy of needs. So we got to make sure if they're breathing, they got to make sure that get the work on the emotions aspect of it first, which is a
Right.
great point,
Yeah.
because that I am a very logical thinker, which is why I do terrible on those conversations whenever they call in and they're pissed, and the girls in the office are like, "Hey, Tersh, you need to take care of this." I was like, I'm the last person that needs to take care of that, because I'm just going to tell them the logical answer, and it's going to piss them off even more.
You bring a good point up there, because I actually think it's a great defense for every business owner, to have someone else answering their phones. And I mean, we could get into a million reasons why, with their time management, their brain space, all that kind of thing. But for this reason is another good one, because it gives you kind of that buffer. And one of the greatest healers is actually time. So when people call and they're heated in the moment, it's really nice to have someone else take that initial kind of hit, so to speak, get that emotion out, let them get it all out, and validate. We'll dive into that a little bit more, but what to validate, but validate them, and it will help de-escalate them, and then come back to them after you've spoken to a manager, or if you need to get involved, then you call them back. But at that point, they should be more de-escalated, because they've been validated, the feeling's been acknowledged, and now their logical brain can step in more. Because that
I love,
emotional brain, when they're upset, is just it tightens.
yeah, I love what you mentioned there about the allowing them, like validating what they're saying, because I believe our team does a good job. I don't believe that they do anything wrong here, but there are times when I wonder if they are truly validating their concern, or if they're just trying to get off the phone so that they can pass it off to me. You know what I mean? How would you get into that? I know you have some steps there, but I don't want to jump ahead too far if we need to,
Yeah, no, let's talk about that.
yeah.
It's one of the most important things. And I mean, I think teaching what we teach our CSRs is just empathy on the phone is one of the most important things, because the customers have the greatest connection with people. We were talking about this earlier with some of the businesses decisions you've made. When you feel like you have a connection with that company, then sorry, your phone fell out.
Oh,
Then
you're fine.
you're just more likely to do business and stay doing business with them. And so
So
it's
so
important to
explain the
feel that
difference
connection.
between empathy and sympathy.
Okay, that's a good question. We actually teach about that. I mean, empathy is you're putting yourself in their shoes, and you're saying, "Hey," and it doesn't mean you have to have gone through it before. A lot of people think to have empathy, you have to have gone through it. Okay, so I haven't lost a parent yet. I've lost other people. I haven't lost a parent. So if I'm talking to someone that's lost a parent, I'm not going to know 100% how they feel. However, I can put myself in their shoes
Mm,
and feel what it would feel like. Whereas sympathy is you're just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like you're not looking down on them, but you're just like, you can't put yourself in their shoes. And so empathy is where you put yourself in their shoes. And that's the key to validating customers, especially when they're wrong, because you don't want to validate what's wrong, if that makes sense. So for instance, let's take an example.
oh, that is a
Let's
great
say,
point. Can you just mention that? Say that
yes.
again so that people miss
Okay.
it.
So you don't want to validate what is actually wrong. You want to validate their feelings, because their feelings aren't wrong. People's feelings are wrong. So for instance, if you've got a customer who, you went out and did a job, you maybe told them about the price before, but somehow they missed it. So it's an $800 job, and they're saying, "I'm not going to pay over $500." Like, they're wrong. The price of that job is $800. But so what can you validate in that moment? You can validate their feeling. So, "Hey, David, I understand how important it is to get value out of the services, that you're getting, and how important it is to make sure, that you're being smart about the repairs you do on your phone or your home." Sorry. So you can validate their feeling, because as a consumer, and we're all consumers, we understand that we want to get value, and we understand we want the price to be right. So I'm not saying he's right. I'm validating his feeling, because I felt that before about services. So I can validate that, and I can have empathy for that. So, and that's going to de-escalate someone immediately, because when we're angry and we're heightened, or when we think something's wrong, we want to be heard. We want to be seen. And so
Yeah.
you're hearing and seeing their feeling, and you can validate that. It doesn't mean I'm going to give him a price cut. It doesn't mean I'm saying he's right and I'm going to credit him $300. All I'm saying is I understand how you're feeling, and that's immediately going to help their logical brain come on a little bit more, because I'm
Yeah.
validating the feeling.
Now, play that scenario out, and if you had that conversation with someone, where did you go next?
Okay, so well, it depends who I am. So I mean, if I'm and it depends on the situation, but if
Yeah.
you're basic CSR, even and maybe they don't have all the answers, they don't know how to solve that. then you're validating that feeling state, and you want to make sure they feel heard. So again, you repeat kind of what they said. And so again, that helps validate them. So you're upset because you feel like this job should have only been $500. You got an invoice for $800 and you're kind of wondering what to do to take care of that invoice. Well, let me get that, make sure I got all your information correct. Let me pass this on to our project manager and we can look at this more and get back to you. So they're feeling like, hey, they heard me, they understand what the problem is, they're going to get back to me. And in general, even if you're the problem solver, it is still good to maybe sometimes put a buffer because it helps de-escalate them and it helps empower you to know how to come back to them. So even
And
if you're
like your
taking the
buffer,
call,
you mean like
buffer and time.
yeah.
Yeah, just give them a little time to cool off and give you time to figure out how to approach it again, but you're at least getting all the information. There's some times where you have to step in right away, but most of the time you can, even if it's 5-10 minutes, just some sort of little break to recollect yourself and also for them to feel heard and recollect themselves.
Yeah, there's been times where I can remember a very, very specific time, and I don't know how the conversation ended the way it ended because if I was talked to the way I spoke to that person, I would wanna murder me. Like, it was but I had this person called our technicians a liar, and it immediately triggered me to I just went like very deep tone of like, you're not gonna like Papa Bear tone, like, you're not gonna talk about my guys that way almost. And he was like, "Oh, that's neither here nor there. That's not what I meant, like that, whatever." And I was like, I don't know, maybe he knew that I was not gonna back down at that point, and then he did. And I never would like, I've never talked to a client that way before, and I don't want to do it again. But the moment that he attacked my technicians, I really was, like, not happy at all. And then I ended up going to his house personally, and him and his wife, and talk with them, and they had legit concerns. There were processes and our processes in place that failed them as a consumer. And so they had every right in the world to complain. We, like, did do what we said we were gonna do, but they expected something different. Like, we legit did exactly what we said we would do, but what we didn't do was we didn't say what we were not gonna do, and they expected that to be done as well, and that's on us. And we learned, like you said,
Mhm.
learn how to tweak that process throughout the whole thing. And but man, that was a rough conversation to have. I should have taken 10 minutes and said, "Let me call you back after I can figure this out. Give me 30 minutes or something."
You nailed so many things there. I guess number one, again, that's where it's helpful that I mean, your business is your baby, right? So everything is going to feel more personal.
Right.
And that's where it's helpful, again, even if it's someone internal, but it's not you as the owner answering your phones or even using some third party,
Well, this particular
is
guy had already
it's
gone
helpful
through
sometimes.
a couple of
Okay.
people, and, like, he was waiting for me to call him back, and I had given him the time, like, I had actually given him a day and then called him back. And so, yeah, it definitely was helpful to have someone else take the brunt of his anger to start with. But I think
Mhm.
he was still on fire the day later when I called him.
Yeah. Well, and okay, but the other important point you brought up there is, we're talking about the caller and their emotions and their logic, but you're human too. So all those same things that are happening in their brain are happening in your brain. And okay, one of the most fascinating studies, they did MRI scans of people who were in pain, in physical pain and in emotional pain, and they found that the very same part of the brain is activated when you're in physical pain as emotional pain. So when your daughter comes home and she just broke up with her boyfriend, it's as real to her brain as if she broke her leg. Like it's just real. So that's true for your customer. They're in physical pain. But you're also in pain. They just dished your team. And so that hurts. And so I
Yeah.
mean, I think realizing and being self-aware that you're being aware of what the caller is going through, your customer's going through, but also what you're going through. Okay, I need to do an emotional check right now because I'm upset. I need space right now to de-escalate, and I've got
Yeah.
to work through these, and I got to talk to someone who can validate me because I'm upset right now. And that's okay. That's real. It's human.
Yeah, and
It's a
so
very important.
it's funny you mentioned that too because we just went through a hurricane a couple weeks ago, and so myself, and my team members, we all lost power in our house, whether it was
Mm,
for a couple hours or whether it was for a full day. And uh, Tony and I, we were talking about this, and so like we lost power at 9 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, yeah, 9 o'clock, and it was already cooling down outside, and then it actually got cool that night, so we didn't have to worry about like being super hot and sleeping in a hot, sweaty house. Uh, and then the next morning, it was fine for the most part, but then I got this text message saying that it was gonna be like 8 o'clock that night before the air conditioning was fit or the electricity came back on. So then I knew I wasn't gonna have air conditioning until then. And I was like, all right, that's fine. But then about lunchtime, it's starting to get hot in here. Like, because
mm,
I don't have any trees around the house, like the sun's on the house and it's just beating and it's starting to get really warm in the house. And I'm starting to get irritated, like really fast. And Tony and I both said, like, because his was a very similar situation. If my air conditioning didn't, it came on earlier. It came on at like 3 o'clock, and I was thinking, man, I gotta leave the house. I'm about like the smallest thing is gonna make me snap.
mm,
And we both were laughing. We were like, that's how our customers are every time they call us. They're in freak out mode because they don't have any
mm,
air conditioning. It's
mhm,
broke and it is
mm,
hot in their house. We're like, we just gotta remember that the next time that we are calling or people are calling in and they're pissed off at the world.
mhm.
I was pissed off at the world, and like there was nothing anybody could do because of a tree fell on a power line. So, and putting ourselves in that situation in the future, we just have to remember that they're mad, but they're not mad at me. They're just mad at the situation because they are in
Right.
pain.
Right, exactly, 100%, and it just makes you be more empathetic the next time. Because okay, I remember I scraped my knee the other day, which I haven't done for years, and I'm like, "Oh, no wonder my toddler cries when he scrapes his knee, because that really hurt," and you
Yeah,
kind of forget. So I think not that you wanna get hurt, but it is helpful to,
yeah,
have those experiences sometimes to kinda give you a reality check. So I think that's really important, and then I think after you've understood that there is a feeling there and you validated the feeling, and then you can kind of come back and give some more logic. And when you're just demonstrating the logic, there's a few important things to remember. Number one, you don't want to argue with them, because when you argue, you're just putting up their defense. Take the scenario where they were calling, your guy's a liar. If you're going them back and you're just arguing that they're not a liar, they're just going to be defensive. Well, yeah, they are, and you're being defensive back, and nobody wins because you're both being defensive. So
yep,
you want to find what the common ground is and go from there, and then kind of help expand their brain. Um, it's interesting because if you go back way back to Aristotle, I mean, he lived in 300 BC, and he talked about there's three keys to effective communication, and they're weird words, and we'll talk about them. He said there's pathos, ethos, and logos. Okay, what the heck does that mean?
yeah,
So pathos is emotion. So we talked about that. That's an important part of communication. The ethos is credibility, and then the logos is logic. So we've dealt with the pathos, we've validated the filling, and we got to remember the filling throughout. It's important throughout. But then you kind of need to set up your credibility, but not in a way that's demeaning the other person in any way, but just helping them feel they're in good hands. Again, if you take the instance of going into the doctor, because you're HVAC doctors, right?
right.
You want to know that they know what they're doing and to take care of it. You'll sometimes run into scenarios where someone thinks that they know how to do the job better than you. Have you ever had a customer who
Oh
kind of
yeah,
wants to like tell you how to do the job,
engineers.
right?
We
Yeah.
have Gulfstream Aerospace is in Savannah, and they make Gulfstream airplanes, and so there's a ton of engineers that work
Okay.
and live in the area, and you get
Mhm.
to an engineer's house, and they're like, "Oh, this is piece of cake." Like you're like,
Go do this and this and this, and it's not what you're supposed to do, right? But they're
right,
sure it is. They think they're the experts.
yeah,
So I think that's where you validate. You can even ask them, tell me a little bit more what you do. Okay, yeah, that's really
yeah,
fascinating, and I've always been interested in that. So you're being interested in them and genuinely be interested. But
right,
then you kind of talk about your credibility without putting them down. You say, I used to actually think that this was the best procedure and way to do it too. Again, you're showing them empathy. And maybe you didn't think that, but you maybe have thought that at some point,
right,
or maybe someone who did. And then say, but what I learned after getting certified and we worked on hundreds of jobs like this, that actually what can be better in the long run is da 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 da. So
Mhm.
you're not arguing against them. You're agreeing that you used to think that too at some point, or that is a good thought to have. But then you're setting up your ethos, your credibility of why you're actually choosing to do this way and what the benefit is to them of doing it that way, and explain that to them. Give them some of that logic now, where
So
you're
what
explaining why this is the better way.
what I'm hearing you say is you just tell them like, "Yeah, I used to be an idiot too, but now I learned the right way to do this. So this is right." I'm just kidding.
Right, without insulting them, but in essence, I mean, but you're also validating whatever their expertise is in, right? There are a lot of similarities in this engineering and this, but there also are some differences. And so I'd love to show you, what we could do. Because in the end of the day, you want to give them the best solution. Like, you're in it for them too, not just for you. Even when it comes to price, you're in it for them, because even with that, again, if they are upset by the price of something, you're validating that they want to get value and get but you're also then have an opportunity to validate why your price is the way it is because of the way you do things. So, the reason that we charge this much for this job is because, number one, all our technicians are background checked. They're certified, and we do extensive certification. So they know the best way to procedure to do this. We use the highest quality products because we're not just in here to do a Band-Aid fix. We want the best long-term solution. We understand that your home is one of the greatest investments you make, and we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's going to be the longest solution for it. And so that's why we go through this procedure in this way. And the cost of it is this, so that we do it the right way. And so you're not arguing against they want good value, but you're helping to expand their brain on why it benefits them too to pay this much for this job because of the quality they're getting out of it.
Yeah,
And that's
and
where you kind of find
that
that common ground.
long-term quality, and the challenge that I have is for a service technician to communicate the way you just did. That's
Mm.
because a lot of technicians are fixers and they're not talkers, and so it's like, that sounded amazing, but to hear some of my guys say that, they're gonna be like, "Oh, no, I'll stumble all over every single word you just said." But you're exactly right, though, because at the end of the day, that engineer is working on pen and paper. He's not touching live
Mm.
electrical things and charged capacitors that could pop them. And like, okay, you in theory, you're right, but do it, touch that and see what happens. And but you don't want to ever harm a client at all. You can obviously tell I've dealt with some very interesting engineers in the past, but the for the most part, you're exactly right. They want to make sure that they're getting value. And if we just whip out a part for a part, like, that's very much an engineer can do that. But if they see the value in, okay, we're going to inspect the entire system. We're going to use quality parts. We're not going to use the cheapest thing in the world, because they understand that things need to last a long time, and it's wear and tear and items and stuff like that. Using a high quality part and understanding the proper way to diagnose it and proper way to install it so that it lasts longer. There's multiple ways that we can install this, but we're going to install it the right way. Those are all amazing points that I need to do a better job at training my technicians to voice those words in a way that is not like grunt talk.
Sure. And I think it's exposure and repetition and talking about the principles. And it's probably not a one-time conversation, but when something comes up, giving that learning opportunity for everyone. Okay, what would be the best way to handle this? Or next time, what would you do differently? And have them kind of think through, role play a little bit. Nobody likes role playing very much, but it really is effective if you can get them to do it.
It
Um,
is.
and I mean, just in showing them and practicing different words or putting it in their brain. And then maybe that next time they're going to, okay, let me validate the feeling, but not their logic, and then help expand their brain. And they'll start picking these up if you kind of, and even talk about them in your personal life. I mean, these principles totally apply to
Yeah.
like
Oh,
any
yeah.
kind of relationship. And
Talking
so
to
share
talking to my
about,
kids
yeah.
at the end of the day,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're pissed off getting off a school bus, like,
Yeah. It's like validate it. That's all. They just want to feel validated and heard. And you're mad they didn't, or you just found out that morning that they have an assignment due tomorrow that's like this 20-page
right, or they
paper, and you
walk
want to
out
yell at
the
them, but
door and left their report card sitting on the bar. And
Yep.
like that literally just happened this morning, and I'm gonna slap the tar out of him when he
Gosh.
walks in the door.
But
And all afternoon yesterday, he was literally sitting right in front of me, just bebopping on his phone and
oh
not
gosh.
doing nothing. And he, at any point, he could have like, "Here, Dad, here's my report card." Like, I got you, boy.
Right. I mean, and a lot of times they'll solve their own problems, especially the kids, if they just feel validated and feel, that open space. The interesting thing about communication is it's not just this one level of communication, really. There's layers to it. So you have the what happened, right? Which can be different perceptions just based off what parts of it you saw, what were you exposed to, even your past experiences have an interpretation on what you think happened. And then
Sure.
you have your feelings communication of, what am I feeling through all this? And then you also have the impact of what impact does this mean to me personally based off what we're talking about. So I mean, it's interesting. We got a call. We've never gotten a call. We take over 1 million calls a year, and we've never gotten a call quite like this before. And this just happened a couple weeks ago. That we actually had a police officer call in, and it was to one of our roofers, and he was asking for a certain employee, and we said they weren't available, and he said, "Okay, well, do you know when they'll be around? I need to know when they're going to be there, but they can't know I'm going to be there." And the
Uh-oh.
Jill, we call her Jill. So they're like, "Oh, what's going on there?" And he's like, "I'm an investigator. We're looking into child exploitation. We need to show up by surprise. I don't want him to flee." And we were, what do we do with this? So we usually try not to bug our business owners unless like there's emergencies that come up. And so we called the business owner and just sort of telling him, what happened. And, somehow we got to get hold of this guy. We looked him up because we're like, is this a scam? But we looked at the number and it was legit. It was really this investigator. And obviously, at that moment, the business owner's got to have all these things going through his head. First, what happened? Who is this? Like, what's going on? What feelings am I experiencing through this? Like we were saying, and also what's the impact of me on my business because of what the reality of this is. Like, whose home has they gone to? Has anything happened on my clock with all this? So there's these layers to every communication that aren't always conscious that we're both having, and as a business, and also the customers having from their perspective. So the more you can be aware of that and kind of try to maneuver through those as you're dealing with these customers can really be helpful to get to that win-win that you all want
Yeah.
on the call. So
Now I got this. This is some tea I got to get to the bottom of here. I got a question. The technician was being investigated, or
yes, one of
the homeowner?
the technician was.
Oh,
So they needed to
what?
know when he was going to be around so they could go, I don't know, arrest him. I don't know what they were
Yeah,
going to
as a
do. They didn't
business
want him
owner,
fleeing.
you're right. Like one of my
Yeah.
guys is involved in this nonsense. Like,
Right, right. And
oh
what's the impact
goodness.
of that on my business, on everything? And so there's all
PR,
these
like just the
layers.
PR impact of that.
Right. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
So
Yeah, you're right. That is a crazy phone call to get.
oh yeah.
Uh, so yeah, Michelle,
One thing I think
go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but one thing I do want to touch on when
Yeah.
it comes to difficult customers, because I think, if you seek to understand, like Covey teaches first before being understood, that helps with the feelings, getting to that win-win. All those things are really important. But I think it is good to point out that sometimes customers, it's probably like, I don't know, 5 to 10% maybe just of that actually complain that just you're never going to get through to them. There
Yeah.
might be a personality disorder going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah. Mhm.
narcissism, and no logic, no validation, no emotion. They're never going to get it. And so when that's the case, that's when you just have to cut ties and fire the customer,
Yeah.
because no matter what you do, you're never going to make them happy. And it's not worth that emotional baggage to you as a business owner or to your employees for having to deal with them. It's not worth it. And so the
Oh yeah.
majority of people, if you follow these principles, are going to turn around. But every once in a while, you got to fire a customer. And that's
So
just the way it is.
what do you do in that situation whenever you're like you personally or your team needs to fire someone, or you because okay, so because yours is a little different than, say, if we had a CSR sitting right here answering
Right.
the phone. um Whenever you say to a business owner, hey, look, you need to fire this person because I can't have my people being talked to like this. I mean, do you run into that situation? And then what happens
So
if the business owner is like, that's money, revenue. Like I don't want to fire that person. And you're like,
yeah,
well,
It's a really good question. So as far as Jill's office goes and answering calls for our clients, we're never going to make that call. We're not the business owner to know when to fire a customer. We're going to take the information, we're going to validate, help as much as we can, and then pass that information on. We can call people back, but in a really high sensitive situation like that, we're probably not going to be the best person. They're going to get more angry if we're the ones trying to solve that problem. Even though we answer as their receptionist, at that point they're going to want to talk to a manager.
Yeah.
And but so worst case scenario, we can always block the caller if they're calling incessantly and attacking. I mean, we've had, F bombs every other word, and,
Oh yeah.
and where it gets to a point that they just won't leave us alone and we really can't solve it, then we can block it on our end. So it can just go, straight to the voicemail or the business owner, and let them handle it however they can. But as far as the business owner goes, or if it's your internal CSR, I think it's just coming up with a strategy on how to best let them go. I mean, again, depending on how escalated they are, it can be a variety of things that need to happen. But sometimes.
Do you ever have that? Y'all don't have that conversation, do you? Like you would ask the business owner to make that phone call and say, hey, we're not a good fit.
In that situation, it is best for the business itself, just because we don't ever want to lose money for a business. We're never going to turn a customer away
right.
in that kind of thing.
I guess what I'm asking is how, like, I've heard people fire people, and I've heard like Mike Disney is a friend of mine, and I've listened to him role play firing someone. I'm like, oh, that's piece of cake. You made it sound amazingly easy.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm thinking this is going to be the most horrible conversation in the world. And not only that, I just paid a bunch of money to make that phone ring, and now I'm firing that person, But at the end of the day, that person or that individual is going to end up costing you way more money than you're going to make off of them.
Sure.
You might as well cut ties.
And I mean, I've had to personally fire some of our own clients. We very rarely do that, but just if they're very demeaning or just don't work well. And the best way to do it, because it's really for them too, and that's what you have to remember. They're not happy, and you can't make them happy because you've tried every single thing, and you're not going to make them happy. And so that scenario, you're actually still doing a win-win, because they're not going to be happy with you. And so in that case, you just focus on, hey, we're just not the right fit for you. And if they really push you on that, you just explain, the reality of it is I'm never going to be satisfied that you're satisfied. Because again, if you make it a you, they're like, yeah, I will. But if you make it about me, I, as a business owner, I'm not going to be satisfied that we can provide you the quality that you're looking for. Or, I mean, and obviously you're high quality, but do you know what I mean? You find those things that with their feelings that they're never going to be happy. And they still, sometimes when you try to let them go, especially these personality types, they fight harder to hold on. So you sometimes just have to say, look, like, I'm sorry, we can't do it. I can refer you to some other people. Be careful about that, because you don't want to hurt your friend. You don't want to give them a bad one.
I can give a bunch of them, and I'll give it to a friend too, just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah. Another thing is you can raise your pricing. I mean, if it's something where it's recurring and maybe you had a horrible experience the first time and you don't want to deal with that customer again, raise your prices on them. They might filter themselves out.
That's an amazing point that you make there, because we'll run specials sometimes. We actually just ran into this the other day, where like 2 years ago, we ran like a $89 special or $49 tune-up or something like that. And the person accepted that. Didn't approve any of the repairs on the job. And then the next year they called in, and it was an $89 special that we were running during a off-peak season time. And they were like, can I get a discount to the 49? I'm like, no, can't have a discount, because it's already a huge, massive discount already. And then they were like, okay, fine. So they approved it. And then we went out for a regular peak season tune-up, which is $129. And they were like, can you discount it to $99 or $89 like I paid last year? And we were like, man, like, it doesn't matter what we're going to do, they're going to ask for that. They're only going to do that, and they're not going to approve any repairs. So like, that's not like our target audience.
Right.
But I also want to ask about, or just not ask, but mention this. There are certain cultures that want to negotiate the price every single time.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, they want to negotiate the price. And that's such a time suck to for us, because and I've fired a client before over that. And then at the very end of the conversation, like when they finally realized that I was serious, like or not when as soon as I said we're not a good fit, they're like, oh, well, never mind. Like, I'll pay that price. And like, no, because every time we have a conversation,
it's going to be a thing.
You want the discount, you want all these things taken off. And it's like, I don't want to be that guy that adds an additional 20% because I know you're going to ask for a discount. So I give you the 20% off. Like, that's a hassle. We have way too many other clients that value the value that we provide. So like, I guess that's maybe some people don't mind dealing with that, but that's just not something I like to deal with.
Well, yeah, you have to be. I mean, Pumpkin Pun is a fantastic book every business owner should read about figuring out who your top 20% are, and not deal with the rest. And that's how you're going to grow and scale better. So I think that what you're saying is really true. So I think price is one that's going to naturally fire people. Another thing is time. Look, we're booked out for 3 months or whatever. I mean, that's again, they're going to naturally filter.
I did that one time and they're like, yeah, we'll wait. Like, dang it. Like,
right.
But
yeah. So, I mean, that's not fun. Nobody loves doing that, but it is important for you and your team. And again, it's usually more rare when you can follow these principles that you run into that, but it does come up. So, but, and to tie it kind of all together though, going back to the positive of it, of those ones that you usually can turn around, what I always find is fascinating is usually oftentimes the ones where they're either upset or, they were adamant that there was something that was supposed to be done this way and it's not, and you kind of were able to work through that with them. They're often your best ambassadors.
Absolutely.
Because they've been through that emotion with you. And not only do they know you do good work, but they know you now fix problems. This happened with one of my contractors. Yeah. Like, we had a problem when he was redoing our bathroom, and we worked through this, and I was trying to stay rational through it all. And I think I did a pretty good job, but wanted to make sure it got fixed. But afterwards I was recommending to everyone, because I'm like, okay, not only does he do good work, but when problems arise, he's going to fix it. And to me, that means so much.
Yeah.
So it's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think that another thing that I want to make sure that people really understand, and if you do this properly, there's a strong possibility. I'm not going to say it's always the case, but there's a very strong possibility that as long as you keep an open mind, you're going to find out that there are processes within your business that you can probably improve throughout this. And that's the reason why this person is calling in angry to start with.
Oh yeah. It opens your mind. You're so close to your business. You can't always see where the gaps are. So these are just opportunities to see those gaps and then fix them, make you stronger.
Absolutely. Michelle, I appreciate you hanging out with us and sharing. Every time we've talked, it's been a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Tersh. This is a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any questions at all, first, before I wrap things up, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. You can always go to our website. I've got a contact form on there, jillsoffice.com. Also, feel free to email me, michelle@jillsoffice.com, and just love to talk to you about whatever. So
cool. Thank you again, Michelle.
Thank you, Tersh.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com to learn more.